That's how you win an ultra. Okay, race report. The VOGUM 2022 Pegasus Ultra Running, 40 miles from Porthcawl to Penarth. I actually took first place and the course record in 5 hours 38 minutes 20 seconds. First of all, I want to say a huge thank you to Rhys and Pegasus Ultra Running for putting on such an amazing event. From the pre-race admin, the marshals, the checkpoints. I've never had a phone call from a race director before the race to check in, and also look at that medal. Is that not the best medal you've seen? I knew going into this race that 5 minutes per kilometre, or for you milers, you non-believers, 8 minutes per mile was my forever pace. This is the pace I feel that I could hold all day. Given the course, I knew that it would fluctuate up and down with elevation and the terrain with the sand. I had recce'd this route numerous times and raced it backwards a few times with run, walk, crawl. The weather, the forecast changed many times during the week, and it went from saying it was going to be boiling and 22 degrees like it was the weekend before to then pissing down, and then the actual day turned out to be none of this. It was an overcast, 12 degrees with a northwesterly wind, and when I say wind, the wind was ridiculous. The race starts on Treco Beach, and I knew that I had to get out front fast in order to prevent any delays when I got to the single track dunes. Now, many people have a habit of starting too fast, and I spoke with a lad at the start, Martin, an ex-soldier actually, who was about to do his first ultra, having only run 17 miles previously, and I told him 3 things. Number 1, don't start too fast. Number 2, eat and drink regularly, and number 3, walk all the hills. With that in mind,
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I set off clocking a 4:26 kilometre, and you'll see from the pictures and the footage that I was well out in front, and I bet people were thinking that I was about to make that same crucial mistake. But I knew I could hold on to this pace, and it was not out of my capability. I felt comfortable, although my heart rate was elevated because of the headwind was already prominent, but this was only the beginning. As I made my way through the caravan park and entered into the start of the dunes, I was having to put significantly more effort in order to maintain the same pace, or maintain my easy pace, because of the headwind and the sand. And this reflected in my heart rate. My heart rate at the start of the race was in the 170s, and I knew I had to work and do what I could to bring that back down to a more manageable 160 something. The wind, however, had other ideas, and as we turned inland towards the Merthyr Mawr sand dunes, I thought we would get a break from the wind. How wrong was I? Check this out.
This headwind is absolutely horrible. Got my headwind lead on the chase pack.
At this point, I was about 5 kilometres into the race. I was having to work about 25% harder to maintain my forever pace because I was being battered by this wind. Now, I didn't get much footage of the actual race because of this wind, but what I will do is I will overlay footage, so when I speak about areas, I'll overlay footage from my recce. I spent most of the race alone, and I went inside myself and zoned right out, and I focused on getting it smashed out. Anyway, crossing the stepping stones at Ogmore, I could see the film crew the other side, and I'm not joking when I say I basically glided across the stepping stones, and at one point my right foot slipped a little bit and I thought I was in the tank. Luckily, I was carrying so much speed I managed to keep upright and keep going. Arriving at checkpoint 1, approximately 13 kilometers just at Ogmore by Sea car park. The night before, I'd written times on my hand that I had to be in the checkpoints, and I had to be there at 9:10 in order to break 6 hours. I was there 13 minutes early. Running at the checkpoint, I was met by Rhys, the race director, and some superbly smiley volunteers who filled my water bottles. The first thing out of Rhys' mouth was, "How was that wind?" I smiled through gritted teeth and said, "Brutal." With Tim in second place, hot on my heels, I just left the checkpoint as he was approaching. Somehow, in the first 13 kilometers, with that brutal headwind, I'd managed to gain 13 minutes on my projected finish time. And despite the wind, I'd managed to gain a control on my heart rate at this point, with my religious nutrition plans of every 20 minutes taking a bit of tailwind and every 30 minutes taking a salt tablet. I felt fantastic. As I started to climb above Southern Down, the hill is steep, and there was no way I was running it. I put my hands on my quads in order to give me extra force to push me up the hill, and I managed to pull the number off my shorts, so I had to stop to try and pin it back on again. And as I did, Tim was literally within touching distance.
After filming from the checkpoint one, then wind is disgusting, then slow filming, still in the lead, just about. Whoa, brutal.
As I descended the steps into Southern Down Beach, I knew there was a big pull out of Southern Down, and I'd have to walk, and that would be below my forever pace. The plan was always to walk any hill that was quite steep. As I walked the hill, it was clear that Tim was definitely power hiking a lot faster than me at this point. I had two options. Number one, increase my pace and effort and possibly put myself in a hole. Or number two, stop, have a chat. Being a social butterfly, I love to chat to people, and as I come through a gate, I held it open for Tim and asked him his name. For the next few kilometers before the next checkpoint at Llantwit, I spent with Tim, and it transpired that this was Tim's first ultramarathon, or first event. He'd run ultras in training but never actually done an event, and he used to work with Ben, who won the last race where I came second in the Vale. Small world. I've actually been out with Ben lately on the dunes, and Ben's a great runner as well. With the route being a little bit tricky, Tim lived local but hadn't run sections in Barry, so he's a little bit concerned about navigation there. And as the headwind battered us, we handrailed the coasts through many farmers' fields into Llantwit. I'd increased the gap somewhat, and coming off the path down towards Llantwit, I nearly made a crucial error by taking a wrong turn or just missing a turn in, heavily in the zone. I was just following a path. Lucky for me, I'd run this route numerous times and realised my mistake within 5 meters. Not so lucky for other people. This unravelled at the end, and it happened to many people at this point in the race, and they ended up running an extra half a kilometre in the wrong direction. Anyway, checkpoint 2, Llantwit Major. The volunteers again were amazing. They took my bottles off me, and as I tried to open the tailwind with no success, one of the volunteers took it off for me and opened it for me. And whilst this was going on, I took advantage of the oranges and managed to smash a few oranges down whilst they were filling my water. And as I was leaving, Tim entered into the checkpoint, and I asked him how he was feeling. He said he just started to begin suffering with a bit of cramp. I told him to smash some oranges down him. As I climbed out the steps of Llantwit, I shouted to him, keep on top of your nutrition. In hindsight, I had salt tablets on me. I didn't really know how much I was going to use. I was going to use them every half hour, but I had an emergency just in case. I should have given some to him, but it wasn't until the end that I realised that I had some spare, and I didn't use them all. Next race, I will definitely carry more just in case I come across this again, because a few races ago this happened to me, and a runner actually gave me some of his salt tablets, which helped me massively. As I approached Aberthaw Power Station, I knew the run around it had to be different because I'd just come off the trails. I'd set my gait and my run form as such. My Saucony Peregrine 12 STs had held up amazingly, but at this point I was about 20 miles in and I was ready for a shoe change. I don't know if anybody else who runs these ultras does this, but I know if I focus on my run technique and I keep my cadence and form at a certain level that I'll avoid any muscle cramps or any signs of fatigue. What I mean is, if I overstride, chances are I can activate different muscles in my legs which will cause problems. Over the years, I found a perfect rhythm to hold off the cramp. Too fast, I'll get cramp. Overstride, I'll get cramp. So there's a sweet spot, definitely. And as I run through Porthcawl Caravan Park, I was excited to put on my Nike Tempo Next Percents. Checkpoint 3 was at the bottom of the park, and as I approached, despite my aftershocks blasting, my 5 hour 36 minutes combination of Clubland, which at the start I actually joked to Bob when I put my playlist on that this should take me to the end. We all laughed, and I actually ran 5:38, so only 2 minutes off. Anyway, I could hear the roars and the cheers of the stacked checkpoint. There were loads of people there. I give my water bottles and a tailwind to them whilst I located my bag. I sat down, and as I was changing my shoes and socks, Nathan came down the steps in second place at this time. Obvious to me then that Tim's cramps had slowed him up somewhat. Nathan was looking strong with no drop bag. He was in and out of the checkpoint within 30 or 40 seconds, pretty sharpish. I said to him, well done, you're looking strong. Now Nathan has actually raced with me before when I finished second in the run, walk, crawl. I think Nathan had a top 10 finish there as well. At this point, nearly forgot to take my Imodium. Quick sip of Coke. New shoes on, feeling like a fresh man. I left the checkpoint just ahead of Nathan, and within seconds I realised it was a serious problem. My brand new soft flask that I'd bought just days before was bleeding water fast. And this was also my tailwind. Checked the cap, undone it, put it back on 3 or 4 times. And I just must have I thought it was pierced accidentally on the handover. With this in mind, I was faced again with 2 options. Number 1, put it back in my pouch and hope it doesn't leak too much, so I can use it later on, because the plan was 1 tailwind an hour. Or number 2, neck the remaining half a bottle now and then deal with it later. I chose option 2 and necked it back because obviously I didn't want to lose that tailwind, because it was going to be too much faff to try and put any more. Luckily in reserve I had cliff blocks and a high 5 gel just in case. I didn't want to have the hassle of trying to pour that tailwind into a sachet. So trying to keep a good distance from second place Nathan, who was not layering up. And funny thing is, as I approached Barry Bedos, I went to have a sip of my water to wash down my regular salt tablets, and I'd realised that the staff had mistakenly put the tops on, or the caps on the wrong bottles, and that was the reason it was leaking and it wasn't pierced. So that definitely saved the day, which meant I could use that bottle again at the next checkpoint and resume my normal strategy of 1 tailwind, 1 water. At this point, having only had half a tailwind, I took a shot block as an emergency, and as I approached Barry Beach, I looked back and I could see Nathan was still maintaining a solid pace but keeping the gap. Now I didn't have an understanding of how far that gap was, but I continued to press on, carried by my Nikes. I felt comfortable even at this stage in the race, 30 miles deep, clocking off 8-minute miles, and as per the recce last week, Barry Beach was busy, and as I made my way staggering through the crowds, I could see the gap was closing. I thought, this guy must be a machine. I just ran a 50k PB of 4 hours 23 minutes, and this guy was still closing the gap, even though there was no way that I was running the hill out of Barry Beach. I was glad to see Nathan opted for the same choice. With this in mind, once to the top, I knew I had to keep pushing. Having run this route on the Vale numerous times, I automatically thought that I was going a certain way through the streets, and with my watch shouting at me that I was going the wrong way, I looked back and I could see Nathan with his hand in the air at the same time. saying that it was actually a different way, so I had to double back on myself, just managing to stay in front of Nathan after an extra couple of 100 metres. That could have been damaging and could have possibly led to a DQ because it goes round a different way through Barry. But I still managed to hold the lead at this point. The wind still battering me. The last checkpoint quickly approaching at around 51 kilometres, and at this point I was greeted in style. Whilst I filled my water bottle, Nathan approached, and I joked to the marshals as he was running in. I said, "This guy's been following me 50k. I said, "I can't shake him off." One of the marshals said, "Do you want me to put a hole in him?" or something like, "Do you want me to stop him?" or something. And as I left, we shook hands and we joked about being battered by the wind for 50k. I'm glad I wasn't the only one who felt it, and Nathan was almost fed up with it too. And as I left, he shouted at me to run strong and he'll see me at the finish. What was to come was the dreaded cycle path and the dual carriageway. Now, I'd run this couple of weeks previously. I knew that I had to maintain a pace fast enough to keep that gap unreachable, having not known how long he was going to spend in that checkpoint. And along the dual carriageway, my batteries on my headphones decided to die, so now I truly was in my mind. But this section went well. I kept ticking along, kept plodding off at a good decent pace. 4:57 per kilometre, 4:56 per kilometre, and I didn't really see Nathan. I was looking back and I didn't see him. It was only when I got to Sully Sports Fields that I was exiting that I looked back and I could just see Nathan entering the fields. And I, again, unsure of distance or time, I still wasn't really sure at this point that the win was mine. Now, initially I wanted sub 6 hours, but I was not going to let this win slip. And as I run down the bendy road back to the coastal path, I increased the pace a little bit further. This last coastal path was a little bit longer than I'd expected last time, so I knew I had to keep the pressure on, because this section also had a few climbs that I wasn't really going to run because there was one killer. But despite this, I decided to adopt a walk 10 steps, run 10 steps on the hill, and I felt great. This worked, even if psychologically giving me a mental break of battering myself uphill. The flowing trails of the gravel track, they were congested. Now, it was lunchtime, filled with walkers, and I shouted as I approached the runners loudly that a runner was approaching, hoping that they'd move out of the way so I didn't have to stop and give Nathan a chance to catch up. So as I breached the last hill, I took a sigh of relief, and it was only at this point, with about 2 kilometres left, I'd say, I was just sitting below 5 hours 30 minutes, that not only was the win mine, but I was going to take the course record as well. The trees ended and I came onto the cycle path, and in the distance I could see who I thought was my mate, and as I approached him, it was my mate Nicky. He'd come down to see me finish.
Here he is! Yes, yes! Come on, son!
Come on!
Nobody's come then! Nobody's come on! Nobody's come past yet, son! Come on!
Elated with the fact, debilitated by a rare brain condition. Last year for me was hell and left me in despair, frankly, and this moment right here, right now, I will never forget. Overwhelmed just how strong I'd been, I pushed on with Walton taking my GoPro, filming this momentous event. I broke the track and headed towards the flags of the Pegasus Ultra Running finish. With my wife on a Hendo in Liverpool, I instantly scanned the finish line for my daughter, who was stood at the finish screaming with joy, a smile from both sides of her face. She, along with my wife, are my biggest fans. I threw my hands up in the air, celebrating not only a race win, a course record, but a day that epitomises everything I now value and believe to be true. Whilst we all go through extremely tough times in life, you have the power to change that. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. I stopped my watch and I was instantly greeted with a welcomed hug from Rhys, the race director. At this point, I'd asked him to confirm that I'd broken the course record, which he said I had, and he couldn't get over how fresh I'd looked. And he said, "Oh, you want to run back?" I said, "Yeah, I will with that tailwind." A beaming Casey ran over to me and hugged me with excitement. As I stocked up on biscuits and snacks at the finish, I could see Nathan running in, having run an amazing 5 hours 42, equaling the previous course record. Yes. At the end, we had a chat about how he kept me on my toes all day, and again laughed about the wind. Stayed around for a bit, waiting for my mate Bob, who crossed 9th in the end, which was a great effort despite his blisters. And then Tim crossed 12th, having made a few navigational errors, and Cramp made it a tough day. But I said to him, 6:30 for his first ultramarathon is still phenomenal. And as I sit here today making this video, I'm still completely amazed with my performance, and reflecting on the experience, I know this is only the beginning. The VOGUM 2022, you were a blast. So this is the medal, and this was what I received for coming first. Guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Quite long-winded, but if you're ever looking for an event, Pegasus have a thing called the Slam, where there is numerous events, different distances. Definitely advise checking them out and giving them any questions. Drop them in the comments down below. But from me, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in a few days.